So last time we created a server which lets us access the website through localhost. So if I run node dot, I turn on the server, and if I now go to my browser and write localhost, it opens the website that we created earlier. But what we need to do now is let the server transmit the messages between our clients so we can actually have a functioning chat app. We can finally use our sockets to set up communication between the client and the server. You can imagine the socket as sort of a wall socket for electricity. And when you connect a socket, all of the information flows through it in both directions. So the server can send data to the client, and the client can send data to the server whenever they want, as long as they have a connection established. So let's actually establish that connection. I'm going to do io.on. Now, the on event sort of catches any event that is transmitted between our server and our client. So we need to pass a string that is the name of the event. And the first event that we need is connection. So when we have a connection, what we want to do is call a function that basically creates a new socket. If you can imagine this like array of sockets on an extension cord. So we want to add a new socket, and that's the new client in our chat platform. So we're going to have a function which passes as a parameter a socket. And you can imagine this as a button press. When there's a new connection, this function simply gets called. So let's test to see what happens, basically. We're going to console.log, a new user has joined. To make this work, what we also need to do is sort of add a connection on the client side. The first thing we need to do is to actually import the socket library. We do this in the server with Express and HTTP and sockets. We don't need that many, we only need one. But the import process is a little bit different when it comes to JavaScript in our website. We will create a new script tag up here above our current script tag, script. The reason we put it above is because libraries need to be loaded before any code gets executed. Otherwise, we try to execute code before the library is loaded, and so our machine has no idea what we're trying to do. And we won't add any code inside of this tag, but right after the script word, before this more than sign, I'm going to write src, which means source. And we're trying to get the source of a library here. I'm going to do equals, quote, quote, and then the name of this library is /socket.io/socket.io.js. And now let's actually create a new socket on the client side so that they can communicate with the server. I'm going to do var socket equals io. So you can imagine this io as a function that gets called, and that generates a new socket, just like we do in here. Well, this was a lot of theory, so let's actually run the server and see what happens. I'm going to do node dot in the terminal, reload our website, and nothing seems to have happened, but if I check the console, it now says a new user has joined. And that's because in the client side, this line gets executed. Immediately, a connection is established with our server. And the server says, okay, well, a new user has joined. Now we need to actually handle messages. The current way that we do this is with a button and input. This is quite informal because all we have is text and a button. But usually the way things are handled in HTML is with a special element called a form. Basically what they do is you enter some sort of data, and when you submit the form, it sends a request to the server. Usually imagine you enter a username and password, and then it sends a request to the server saying, well, does this person exist and is the password correct? But instead of checking for if the password is correct, the request that we're going to send to the server is we're just going to send messages as our request. So we're going to take our input and button and just cut them and put them in here. Just going to press tab a few times to make sure that it is indented properly. We can actually delete this onClick function because now it's a form. We need to somehow reference our form in our JavaScript code in the script tag right here. And the way we did this last time, we'll do it again, is by creating an ID, an identifier. Let's say message form. So now lower here, I'll create var form, and then we want to reference it, document.getElementById, message form. And that's it. Now we want to add an event that gets called when we want to submit this form. So we'll do this by writing form.addEventListener, And as the name suggests, this is just listening for the event. And the event that we want to listen for is submit. So we want to catch the exact moment this form gets submitted, or that is when the user presses this button. It's the exact same event, but since it's now a form, it will be handled differently by the code. So on submit, we want to call a function and sort of an event as a parameter. There's one thing to keep in mind, and that's that forms in HTML have a default way of behaving, because one of the things it does is reload the website when you submit a form. But instead of reloading the website, we just want to, continue being on our website, but send a request still. So we'll just prevent the default behavior by writing e.prevent default. Then I will copy this part in the click function and paste it here. This is so we grab the text that was written in our input, so we can send it as a message. And then, so that we don't send in empty messages, we can check actually if the message is empty or not. So we'll do if input content is empty. Well, now I just check if it's empty, then do something. But I really want the opposite effect. I want to check if it's not empty, then I send them the message. So instead of an equals equals, I do not equals. The exclamation point means not in most programming languages. So if the input content is not empty, what I want to do is send the message. And the way this is called in sockets is emit. Socket.emit. And this has two parameters. The first is what kind of event I want to emit, because it's not automatically a message. It can be a user connected, a user disconnected, a login, a delete message event. There are many, many types of events that can exist. So to organize them, we need to give it a title. But the simple title that I will choose to give it is chat message. And the content that we want to emit is just the input content. That is the content of the message. If the message content is not empty, then emit it. And that only happens when this form is submitted. But one more thing I want to do is to actually clear the content of this input element. Because imagine if every single time you sent a message, you had to clear the text you had just written. To make this easier, I'm going to remove this dot value. And now this variable isn't just the string, it's the entire element. It references the entire element. So in this if statement, I want to add the dot value, because you can imagine I don't just want the element anymore, I want the text itself. As we previously had the dot value here, now I'm just adding it to the end of a variable. And in the socket.emit, I will do the same. Input content.value. Now after the message gets sent, we're going to do input content.value, and we're going to set it to an empty string. That means we basically clear it and it will be empty. Now we're able to send messages, but the server needs to catch any message that we're sending. So we're going to go back to our server, and inside of the connection, make sure that you're inside, because all the code that we're going to write is handled while a connection takes place. So it's within a connection. We're going to do socket.on, just like in our client, chat message. And now we want to write a function which sort of gets executed when a chat message is sent. So we're going to do function, and then the parameter is just the parameter that was sent. And the parameter that was sent, well, there were two parameters. The first was chat message itself, but the second one was the content of the message. So I'm going to write content. We want to emit this to all other users, but for now, we're just going to console log it. So now when a user sends a message, we should see it in the console. Let's close our server, reload it with node dot, go to our chatter, and if we reload the website, well, it said 2 users joined, but that's probably a bug. And now if I send a message like hi, it erased, and we see hi in the terminal. So this successfully got console logged. But we don't see it here. It just vanishes. So what we also want to do is sort of emit the message that was sent, or that is, we want other users to see those messages, not just the server. So I'll do io.emit chat message content. You'll probably notice that this looks very similar to what we did here, except here it was socket.emit and there was io.emit. You know, it's the same functionality, so it looks pretty much the same. We have a way to send messages on the client, but we have no way of catching messages that are incoming. So we'll do that by setting up a similar looking handler in our client as we do in our server. We're going to do socket.on chat message, then create a function, As a parameter, we're going to pass the content of the message that we just received. And then we want to, do all the things we did previously, which is here, we can just sort of copy this code. What this does is it creates a new node, but instead of input content, we just want content of the message that we just got, right? So let's save this. Let's run the server. Yeah, let's reload. I'll write hi. And now it works. The message gets sent. But we're on a single client. So let's create another instance. And we don't see any old messages, but that's because we just connected. But let's send a message. Hey, how are you? And now I see them on the other client. Good, you. We see them on all clients. You can make another client and another. You can make infinite, basically, as much as your server can handle. And they're all going to see the same messages because we're only emitting between them. But we don't really see who sent who, what message. So let's add some nicknames. When a new user joins, we'll prompt them to enter a nickname. And then that nickname will be attached to every message they send. Let's create a function. We'll call that create nickname. There's something called literally a prompt in JavaScript. And we'll use that to let the user input their nickname. We're going to write var nickname equals prompt. In parentheses here, as a string, we're going to pass sort of the prompt that we want to tell the user, and that's choose a nickname. So when the user writes something and presses submit or enter, you can actually see how this works. Let me reload. Okay, right, we never called this function. So we want to call this function as soon as the page loads, and the way we can do that is go into our body tag and do onload. And on load, we want to call some event, and what we want to do is create nickname, parentheses. This works the same way a form is submitted or a button is pressed. It just submits a function as soon as body loads. And the body, remember, is just the content of the website, which means as soon as the website loads, we want to run this function. So let's reload localhost again. And now it wants me to choose a nickname like Vince. Great, but that doesn't append that to the messages. So let's append that to our messages. Now, there's something in programming called scoping, which means that variables created in functions aren't visible to, let's say, other functions. So this form.event listener, that's the scope, but this is a different scope of create nickname. And that means that the variable nickname created in this function is not visible to any other function. In other words, it's a local variable. To make it invisible, we want to make it a global variable. And a global variable is any variable that was made outside of a function, like form, socket. These are global. So we can fix this by, let's move this even further up. We'll have all of our global variables here at the top, and we'll also have a nickname. So I'll set the default nickname to just blank, or we can just set it to anonymous. And then instead of var, because we don't want to declare a variable, we just want to change the currently existing variable, we're just going to do nickname. Not var nickname, but nickname. But still, we don't add it to our messages. So the way we can do that is down here, where we emit a message. I'll add this like fancy styler, so I'll do this like less than symbol plus our nickname plus more than sign, followed by a space, and then another plus, like this. So I'm basically adding strings together to form a bigger string. You can add strings together with a plus sign. And the strings that I'm adding together is this, our nickname, then another separator, and then the content of the message. Now that we have this, if we reload our website, it asks us for a nickname. I'm going to say Vince, and I'm going to create a new user here, and this is going to be Johnny. And then if I sent a message through Vince, like hi, Johnny sees that it's Vince. And then when Johnny responds, we can actually see now two users interacting. And we can have a third user join, call them Maria. And then when Maria sends a message, there's another user. So we're pretty much done. You can send messages endlessly. They are displayed in order. You can have different users with different nicknames. A user can choose a nickname at the beginning. That's pretty much all we need for functionality. Of course, we can add login details, we can add images, we can add a proper style, you know, that's just additional details that I can upload as separate videos. For now, thank you for watching, and I hope you found this instructional series on HTML and JavaScript useful.